What's going on, guys? So I am going to be making a video talking about my summoning Necromancer build because I get a lot of questions on the build while I'm live streaming, and there isn't that many skeletal summoning Necromancer builds out there. There's a lot on Bonespear, there's a lot on Bone Spirit, sacrificing minions for damage, the Sever summoning build, and there's many variations, but this is the one that I currently use because this is the one that I fell into while leveling up my character, creating my own way and making decisions that benefited the character based off the gear that I have and the aspects that I use. I also do play Witch in Path of Exile as a summoner, and I also played Diablo 2 back in the day as a Necromancer, so it's just a little nostalgic for me to try to get the army of the dead into the end game and make it somewhat useful instead of sacrificing them all the time. Before we dive deep into the skill tree, the paragons, and the aspects, and how you actually build this character, I'm going to show you guys exactly how it works and why it works. So this is a summoning Necromancer build that is kind of disguised as a corpse explosion build. So all of your summons and a lot of your abilities are going to be creating corpses, and through those corpses you are going to be generating your essence, healing your skeletons, and doing your damage. And anytime that you have full essence, which is basically the Necromancer's mana, you will be dumping your Bonespear, which is going to be creating more vulnerable enemies, thus increasing the damage of Bonespear. This build is certainly not a let's jump into the middle of the crap and see if we can survive it. It's definitely about positioning yourself behind and around your skeletons so they can take the initial aggression from the monsters, allowing you to cast Corpse Explosion freely or hit them with the Bonespear. I typically try to save my essence for elites and bosses that will pop up. I want to make sure that I'm casting Bonespear immediately on them. That's going to increase decrease the time that they're going to be alive, I guess, and also increasing the damage of my minions and Corpse Explosion. So it's kind of a balance between both. I will sometimes just drain my essence with Bonespear and then get it all the way back up with Corpse Explosion. Sometimes I'll literally just sit there and spam Corpse Explosion even though I have full essence. But the main thing is using the Golem Slam on elites is kind of essential. It keeps them in position. A good alternative to this, and I'm going to be talking about that later, is using a Bone Golem with the Taunt. So I think both are equally good for different reasons. So it's all about paying attention to how your minions are doing. If you're in an encounter and you notice that some of them are dying or they're losing their health really quick, then you want to transition away from a super offensive strategy and start focusing on healing them. And you do that by just raising Skeleton. It's going to spawn a Skeletal Priest. And keeping the minions alive is just a really good way of making sure that huge pack of elites are not just specifically targeting you. Because this build isn't necessarily about barrier regeneration, health regeneration, and there is a bit of fortify. Your defensives are purely based off of your personal positioning in the game and less about the skills that you have, which is, in my opinion, the biggest drawback of this build. Although it's really powerful, as you can see, even when I don't have the proper gear at the current moment, or the best gear that I possibly could be, there's a number of uniques that would benefit this build as well. It still is doing just fine to clear this content at a pretty reasonable speed, and I don't think it's going to be an issue once I get to level 80 and above, and I get more gear that's at that ancestral level. So now that you know the general strategy of the build, let's take a look at the skill tree and how it actually works. So let's go into the skill tree. A link to this is also included in the description box below if you want to go and actually take a peek at the build itself without watching this video. We're going to be opening up with Decompose and Enhanced Decompose. This just is a basic ability that's going to be giving you essence and also creating a corpse at the base of the enemy that you're decomposing. As you can see, it is currently not on my bar because I don't need basic skills that much in the late game, but you might need it in the early game. Bone Splinters and Enhanced Bone Splinters is also fine, like a single point, whatever gets you into the second tree. So whatever works for you, just don't spend too much time in the basic skill tree. Decompose or Bone Splinter. Now let's move down to the core skills. Your Bonespear, Enhanced Bonespear, and Supernatural Bonespear is going to be your main focus here. for your abilities. The supernatural Bonespear is going to be making your enemies vulnerable, which is going to be increasing the damage output of Corpse Explosion. Corpse Explosion is going to be your primary damage dealing ability with this build because it's utilizing your warrior's capability of creating corpses and utilizing those corpses for damage. So this is good for that. It's just going to make everybody else take more damage. We also have one of the more important passives, Hewed Flesh. Whenever your targets take damage up to 12%, it creates a corpse. Bosses are 24%. This is going to be key, especially when you're fighting bosses in the main story and your skeletons are getting killed. You can quickly bring them back up by simply casting a couple bone spears on the enemy. So, kind of nice. We also have Blood Mist moving down the tree. Blood Mist is really key for hardcore necromancers. If you make a hardcore necromancer and you don't have Blood Mist, you're kind of making a mistake in my opinion, because this skill has saved me easily a dozen times and will likely continue to save me. It makes you immune for 3 seconds, giving you the ability to either use your potions or use Scroll of Escape to get out of that dodgy situation. Now let's move on to Corpse Explosion. Again, the main damage ability of this build. Corpse Explosion, Enhanced Corpse Explosion, increasing the radius, and Plagued Corpse Explosion. This deals more damage to enemies that are slowed, stunned, or vulnerable. The mages, our cold mages, are going to be slowing and stunning. Our Iron Golem is going to be stunning. And our Bonespear is going to be making enemies vulnerable. So we're going to be getting this additional damage increase most of the time. Skeletal Warrior Mastery is a no-brainer for the damage and life. This is something that you want to pick away at in the later levels. It's not that important in the early game. However, it's more about the life than the damage, because it's more about getting your Reapers here to create the corpses and less about their damage themselves. Now we have the most important passive in the tree, which is Grim Harvest. This was nerfed, unfortunately, so it's not as good as it used to be, but it's still important. Consuming a corpse generates 6 essence. Consuming a corpse means whenever you either summon a new skeleton or heal them with your skeletal priest, or, of course, blowing them up with Corpse Explosion. So it turns your Corpse Explosion into your primary essence regeneration, which is why I don't have Decompose on my bar right now, because I don't need it at this level. Now we have Fueled by Death. Every time you consume a corpse, it increases your damage. In this case, for me, it's up to 12% for 6 seconds after. This is going to be up constantly because we're going to be consuming all the corpses. Continuing moving down to the curse tree. We don't have any curses right now, but if you wanted to experiment with curses, Iron Maiden, an enhanced Iron Maiden, is kind of interesting because you can turn it into a corpse generation, but in this case, we're just looking for the passives. Skeletal Mage Mastery increases the life and damage of your skeletal mages. Death's Reach, you deal 12% increased damage at a distance, which you will be standing behind your minions casting Corpse Explosion. And then you have Death's Embrace. This is a defensive. Because I'm a hardcore character, I want to be taking less damage when enemies are closer to me, and I want the enemies to die faster if they are right on top of me. So maybe not as essential if you're not a hardcore, but it's still useful passive. Both Death's Reach and Death's Embrace don't really need to be, like, you don't have to work on any of these, like, passives right away if you don't want to. Just put a couple of points in that allows you to progress the trees, and then come back later when you're higher level and start maxing out some of these passives. The most important ones to max in the early game is Hewed Flesh and Grim Harvest. The rest are slow pickaways. Now we're going to be moving down to the next tree. The only skill that I actually use in this tree is Necrotic Carapace. This is going to give you Fortify whenever a new corpse is formed by yourself or your minions. Unfortunately, this is bugged right now and not being triggered as often as it should, but I'm sure it will be resolved soon. But either way, this is still going to be used often, and you'll notice that your Fortify is going to be maxed whenever you're rolling around. This just gives you increased damage reduction whenever the Fortify bar is higher than your health. So when the health drops, Fortify is high, you gain damage reduction. which is key for your defense. Corpse Tendrils, this comes purely from the gear that I'm wearing, and because I have it, it's on my bar. If I didn't have it, it wouldn't be on my bar. It's a useful skill. I would utilize Corpse Tendrils instead of Blood Mist if you were a non-hardcore character. You don't need Blood Mist if you're a softcore character. You really only need it if you're hardcore. So slap it on Corpse Tendrils because it just will stun all the enemies, and you'll be able to cast Corpse Explosion under them, and you don't need to spec into it very much because it's less about the damage it does and more about the stun. Now moving down the tree, we have Golem Mastery, increases the damage and life of your Golem by 75%. This is, again, you want to slowly pick away at this. It doesn't need to be maxed right away, but whenever you notice your Golem is dying more, maybe put a point into this until it's maxed. Now we have the Summoning Passives. So we have Inspiring Leader. Whenever you've been healthy for at least 4 seconds, your minions gain 12% attack speed. This is going to be pretty much all the time because you shouldn't be below 80% just chilling behind your enemy line unless you're taking damage. And if you are, you probably should be using your healing potions. So this is going to cause your skeletal mages to create more corpses. Now we have Bonded in Essence. This is going to increase your skeletal priestess heal. So whenever you see your guys are taking damage, they will be able to heal. Or if you're in a really dodgy situation, you can just focus on healing your minions and keeping them alive instead of casting Corpse Explosion. So this is very helpful for that. Next is Death's Defense. Now your minions cannot lose more than 30% of their maximum life from a single damage instance. This is essential in the late game for fighting bosses and world bosses. Without this, your minions are just going to get wiped out in a single hit, and there's really nothing that you can really do. So maybe not that essential in the early game, but something that you're going to have to consider in the late game. And finally, Hellbent Commander. Your minions deal 30% increased damage while you are close to them. For this specific build, this is probably the least important. And if I was to remove these skills, I would actually put them maybe even into Corpse Tendrils because I have the gear right now, or a different passive of some sort. Maybe Ceration that will help with my Bonespear damage, because you're going to be standing behind your summoning your summons, not with your summons. This is great for a Sever Necromancer build, not necessarily for a Corpse Explosion Bonespear build. So these 3 points, you can throw them anywhere, but for right now, they're in Hellbent Commander. Now let's move down to the key passives. You have 2 choices here. You have Ossified Essence. Your bone skills deal increased damage for each point of essence you have above 50, which is really, really nice. And then you also have Kaelin's Edict, which is going to be increasing your minions' attack speed by 30% in this case, because you're going to have more than or at least 7 minions available because you're a summoning necromancer. So it says 15, but it's going to be 30% because we get that extra bonus. The faster the attack speed, the more corpses are going to be generated, the more damage you're going to be doing. So I actually bounce between both of these key passives depending on what I'm doing, because you still have Bonespear as one of your damage abilities. It's nice to use it. There's also aspects that you can get that increase the benefit of Ossified Essence. So either one is good, but I'm leaning towards Kaelin's simply for the additional attack speed for more corpses. Now we're going to go to the Paragon Boards. Now Paragon Boards, I am going to admit I'm not super knowledgeable about the best and the most efficient way of running the board. I've been experimenting with it a lot, but I'll just kind of explain it. Every time you get a Paragon point, you'll be able to just put one in the nodes. These nodes have different attributes and benefits, and they also get bonuses based off of the nodes that are around them. There's also glyph sockets, so you can find glyphs. There are plenty that are for summoners. So in this case, there's a skeletal mage glyph. There is a skeletal warrior glyph. These glyphs can be leveled up for better attributes if you do Nightmare Sigil dungeons. But you'll probably learn more about that down the road. So the big thing about Paragon Boards is the actual boards themselves. So you're chugging along, you're putting points into the board, you're going up here to this attachment, it's going to give you the ability to choose a brand new board. The first board that I chose was the Cult Leader board, which gave me this legendary node, increasing the damage of my minions, in this case, by 45%. There's also some really interesting rare nodes that are here that I'm going to probably explore in the future and maybe even make some changes here to increase my minion damage and life, minion damage reduction for my minions, and the glyph sockets for warrior damage and increased armor. The second Paragon board, that's really useful, is Flesh Eater. Consuming 5 corpses grants you 40% increased damage for 6 seconds. Because Corpse Explosion is your primary source of damage, this is really, really key. So I would choose either Cult Leader or Flesh Eater as your first board, but both of these boards are going to be your primary focus for the moment. I'm currently working towards another board attachment purely to see what it's like, but I would probably have a better time if I just focused more points in these 2 boards here. Now let's go to Book of the Dead. So you have one option for your Skeletal Warriors, which is Reaper. Reapers have a 15% chance to carve flesh off the enemies, forming a corpse. Again, your Corpse Explosion is your primary damage, so it's kind of key. Under Skeletal Mages, we were going to go with Cold, and then also each time your Cold Mages damages an enemy with their primary attack, you gain Essence back. This is going to be nice because you're going to be Essence starved pretty much all the time as long as you're casting your Bonespears. And Golems. We have 2 options here for the Golems, and both are arguably just as good, just for different ways. You have your Bone Golem, and you can do your Bone Golem, every time it takes 20% damage, it sheds a corpse. The more powerful your Golem gets and the more health he has, the less probability he's even going to take 20% damage, so this might not be as useful. But the Iron Golem down here has a stun effect, which you control by pressing the 3 key in my case, which is an Iron Golem slam that also makes enemies vulnerable for 3 seconds. This is really, really nice because it's going to stun everybody in a circle and you're going to be able to blow them up and they can't do anything about it, plus the increased damage from vulnerable. So I like the Iron Golem. I also find the Iron Golem looks awesome. So it's kind of like a morale boost too, just having the big boy around. It's also great for targeting elites and bosses. So stunning them, freezing them, and then blowing them up, which is a great utility tool. Now let's go to the aspects. Now the aspects, there are lots of different aspects that you can choose from. And keep in mind that I am a hardcore character, so there will be defensive aspects here. So the first one is going to be from our unique Deathless Visage. So this is going to leave behind echoes that explode from our Bonespear. It's just going to be making little explosions that are going to help with damage. It's pretty much straightforward. More explosions are cool. So I have that for the moment. I have this item more for the total armor and the increased maximum essence rather than the ability. In fact, I'll probably be exchanging this item soon. Next, we have a ability that grants us armor for 4 seconds every time we deal damage. This is great for where I'm at right now in World Tier 4, where I'm going to be getting hit pretty hard. So I want more armor every time I do Corpse Explosion. It's going to stack quite nicely. And yeah, I might switch this out for a damage aspect at some point. But yeah, I mean, actually, you know what? I will, while I'm making this video, I will be switching this out because the armor is great and all, but I want my minions to get damage reduction in the higher world tiers. So I'm going to slap that on my chest literally at the end of this video. While you have 7 or more minions, your minions gain 20% increased damage reduction. Now moving on, we have our Skeletal Mage aspect, which is going to cause them to cast Blizzard that deals damage, but more importantly, continuously chilling them for 8% over 6 seconds. This is just going to, again, stack the Corpse Explosion damage, and it's a great crowd control, and also synergizes quite nicely with the Golem's Slam. You'll see the Slam into a freeze quite often. Next up, we have the bubble shield, the most important aspect for hardcore characters, in my opinion, by a long shot. Whenever you are not healthy, a magical bubble is summoned around you for 4.5 seconds while standing in the bubble. Players are immune. This can only happen every 90 seconds. So if you're in a situation where you think you're going to die and the bubble shield pops up, you're going to be immune, and it's going to give you time to think about what to do next if you want to cast your Scroll of Escape or maybe reposition in the fight. Next up, increase your maximum number of skeletal mages by 2. If this was on an amulet, it would be 3. It's not on the amulet because you'll see why in just a second, but this is super nice. More mages is awesome. Next, on our weapon, your skeletons gain increased damage while they're alive, up to 40% after 10 seconds. Because our summons are going to be alive for more than 10 seconds, our skeletons just have more damage. Now we have our amulet. So your maximum number of skeletal warriors is increased by 3. More skeletal warriors means more corpses. More corpses means more damage, which is awesome. Next, we have our rings. Each time one of your summoning minions damages an enemy, they gain attack speed for 3 seconds up to 42%. More attack speed equals more essence and more corpses, which is great. Next, we have a really fun one, which is because it's kind of dumb, but I like it. But the one that we have kind of sucks. I'm looking for a better one. So this can be up to 10% increased damage for each second that you stand, up to 30%. So yeah, there are better versions of this out there. I will try to find it. But basically, you're going to be standing still behind your minions often. We're casting Bonespear or Corpse Exploding. So this is just going to amplify that damage significantly. Look at my attack power right now. Watch when I move. We gain 1,800 attack power by just standing for like a second. If you position yourself in a fight, you're casting Corpse Explosion, you're just doing more and more and more damage, and that's going to be stacking with other things that you have as well. So it's kind of fun. I think it's hilarious. It's just a stupid aspect that works really well. There's plenty of other aspects that, in fact, like I said, the armor is really nice, but I kind of want more damage reduction for my minions now that I'm in World Tier 4. So I'm literally just going to do that while recording this. We're just going to plop this guy in here. We're going to put this guy right there, and bam. There we go. So now our minions are going to get additional damage reduction, hopefully staying alive and causing me to cast more Corpse Explosions. So that sums up the video talking about my summoning build, and if you want to learn more about the build, there's a link to it in the description box below so you can bring it up on a second monitor and try it for yourself. And if you want to see more footage, I have a 17-hour full length from the moment I create this character all the way to defeating Lilith using this build and creating this build for the very first time. If you want to see how it progresses throughout the game, or go to my Twitch channel, twitch.tv/DeadlySlob, and check out some of the VODs if you're interested to see how it works for World Tier 4 dungeon clearing. There was definitely a shaky moment going from World Tier 3 to World Tier 4 with this build. It's quite the difficulty jump up, but once I found a couple of good items, it really started to come together and increased my damage output and my ability to survive. I'm also interested to hear what you guys have to say in the comment section below. I'm specifically interested in summoning Necromancer builds. Sacrificing Necromancer builds are too common, and I find they're kind of lame and boring. They're overdone. So I'm always eager to hear what you guys are doing to try to make things work. There's especially a unique ring that I'm currently looking for that will turn this build not from just semi-okay, but into incredibly OP and one of the best Necromancer builds in the game by far. So if I get my hands on that ring, it's really going to change the game, and I will certainly be making a video showing you guys how that goes. Thanks again for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.